Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to another video about introduction to Git and GitHub. In this tutorial we're going to talk about .gitignore file, which is a specific file to Git. By using this one we can ignore some of or prevent some of our files and directories from unintentionally being committed or added to our GitHub repository. There are several reasons why you may not want to add some of your files to your GitHub repository. So without further ado, let's begin. As always, the notes of this tutorial are in my GitHub repository called intro-to-git. The link will be in the description of the video as well. So here, gitignore, we're going to cover three sections. The first section is we're going to have a case study or how to use gitignore from scratch, and we're going to see how we can automatically create gitignore with the help of GitHub and another website that I'm going to introduce. So let's begin with why you may not want to add some of your files to a GitHub repository. There are several reasons. One of them, you may work in a huge data set. Okay, consider you're working on a deep learning project or whatever, and it consists of like millions of images. So definitely you don't want to just add all those images to your GitHub repository. And you may have some files and passwords or tokens that are private to yourself, and you don't want to publicly show it to others. So you don't want your passwords to be available to other users or other colleagues of yours that are working on that project. And one of the important things that you may want to ignore them from being pushed to your GitHub repository are system or application specific files. For example, .id, which is created by PyCharm, it consists some configurations that are specific for your computer or for your laptop or for your OS. And if you push this .id to your GitHub project, to your Git project, let's say, if other colleagues of yours clone this .id, they're going to be in trouble because they also need to create their own .id, and each time you pull or you push a change, you're going to have a conflict because the .ids are not the same for two PyCharm applications. So if you're not a Python programmer, there are other programming languages has their own configuration files that are specific to the OS or the system. So there are several reasons that you may not want to add some files. And in this tutorial, we're going to see how to create .gitignore file from scratch and using two other approaches. So let's continue with our Git 01 project that we had earlier. Okay, as you can see, there are three files here, names.txt. These files are from other tutorials. So right now, consider that we want to create a folder that contains a text file which has some passwords and usernames. Okay, if you're working on Windows, you can graphically just create a new folder like this. Let me call it credentials. To be aligned with our tutorial, and consider we've got, for example, a text file here called credentials as well, and inside this text file, for example, we have like username. I want to keep my GitHub username, password like asterisks, let's minimize them. Okay, so if we execute git status command, it's going to say credentials untracked, so let committed. So you may ask yourself, okay, I'm not going to commit it till the end of this project. I'm sure that I'm going to how can I say, I'm sure that I'm going to put it away from my commits. I'm not going to add it throughout the project. So it's possible you may be able to do so, but consider that that there are like 10 files modified here and 10 untracked files here, it's gonna be really hard for someone to keep track of the files that they are not supposed to be committed or added to the Git repository. So it's better to err on the side of caution and put these files in gitignore file to make sure that they are not going to be even unintentionally or by mistake added to the GitHub repository, your repository. So simply in the main, in the root of the project, create another text file like this, okay, and rename it to .gitignore. Okay. Yes. Okay. And open it using a notepad. Yeah, notepad. Because it's a text file. So .gitignore file is recognized by the Git project. So whatever you put here, and remember that your addresses should start from the root of the project, okay? For example, credential is in here, so you don't need to put the whole project, whole address here. Just starting from the root of your project, add the path to your file or the directory that you want to ignore it. Here, for example, I want to ignore credentials, and adding a simple slash here just kind of conveys the message that it's a directory. So when someone sees it, they're going to realize that it's a directory, not just a file. So like this, simply, I created a .ignore file and just I added the name of the folder or the directory that I want to ignore it from my files. And simply, again, as you can see, I executed git status again, and there is no sign of credentials here because the git recognizes .gitignore and it ignores the files that are inside of it. And it does not even suggest you to add it to your project. And if you want others to use your .gitignore file, you can add your .gitignore file. It's better to add it as always. And like always, git add .gitignore git commit -m a message like credentials to gitignore and git push original. Yeah, that's it. And again, I'm gonna run git status so you can see nothing changes. It doesn't even tell me, you even suggest me that credential is in this folder and it's on track because the git knows that you have a plan and you don't want to add it. And okay, let me show you GitHub. Okay, my name. Okay. Okay, as you can see, .gitignore file is here and credential is here. And it doesn't need to be a directory. Consider, for example, let me add another new file. And it could be, for example, database or whatever. Yeah, consider it's a database.txt. It doesn't matter to be txt, it could be anything. And you don't want to add it to your GitHub repository, Git project. Again, git status, it's going to say that database is untracked or modified. So simply you can add it to gitignore and it will be ignored even from suggestions. So its name was database.txt. I'm going to save it and let execute git status. It says that gitignore is modified, but there's no sign of database.txt. So I'm going to again add gitignore git commit like add database.txt to gitignore and git push origin. Okay. Okay, let me refresh it. We're going to see database here. So that's it. That's how you can create your .gitignore from scratch. So how about creating .gitignore automatically? One way to create .gitignore automatically is using the GitHub itself. GitHub provides like tons of templates for .gitignore and under this section add .gitignore while you are creating a new project. Here you can add, you can find your programming language that you want, like, I don't know, I saw, yeah, C, C++, Python. I mainly use Python, so I'm gonna type it. And here, okay, if you choose template for yourself and let me add a name, and I'm gonna choose private because I don't want to notify others about this. And I'm going to create repository, and we're going to see that the new repository, yeah, contains only one file, .gitignore. And as you can see, let me zoom in a little bit. As you can see, there are lots of items here, like for example, the first one is PyCache. If you're using Python, you know that when you run your codes, there are some files created by this name underline PyCache, and a lot of directories and folders that GitHub thinks that it's better not to add it to GitHub repository because they are system specific for Python, and it's correct. They shouldn't be added, like for example, yeah, environments. Definitely, environments are something are installed libraries on your computer on your system, so others cannot benefit from your virtual environment being publicly shown, and it's very heavy. It contains a lot, it gets a lot of volume of your project. For example, it may get to 1 GB, so you really don't want to add it to your project. So this way you're sure that somebody that has studied Python for several years has gathered all of this folders. So you make sure that you're not going to unintentionally add a lot of items to your project. This is one way that you can create your .gitignore. And if you have created your project and you just want to add it, simply create this create a sample project and copy the items inside the .gitignore and take it to copy and paste it to your own gitignore project and simply add your project and go on. Add the .gitignore to your project and go on. Okay, this is one way. Let's see the other way that we can create .gitignore file automatically. So another way is to use toptal.com. It has a very simple UI. Besides Python, you may want to add some even other programming languages, or for example, you may want to have Python and PyCharm together. This is not something that GitHub does not provide this. GitHub says that just you can choose just only one template, but .gitignore.io lets you to choose as many templates as you want. For example, consider I'm working on a Python project. I'm gonna develop it on PyCharm, and maybe I'm gonna use Jupyter Notebooks. Yeah. So I add all the templates that I want, and I click on create. And as you can see, it gives you a raw text file. You can using Control S save it, or simply Control A and Control C copy it and paste it to your project. And as you can see, it has all the options that you want. For example, this is the .ipynb checkpoint that I mentioned here at the beginning file, for example, .ipynb checkpoints. This is something that Jupyter Notebooks create to save the checkpoints and other stuff that they need. And for example, under the PyCharm, it says, for example, .id, let's ignore the .id because it's system specific. And a lot of stuff are listed here, so we don't want to check them one by one. So this is another way that you can make sure that your .gitignore file is safe, and you're not going to add some files that are not that you weren't intended to add them. For example, these are SQLite DB. These are for Python most of the time used by Python because yeah, this is Django stuff. Those of you who are practicing Django, you are going to make sure that your databases are not going to be pushed in your GitHub repository because they may contain a lot of items and a lot of private stuff. So that's it. We covered how to create .gitignore from scratch, and we checked how we can create .gitignore using GitHub and toptal website. So that's it for today's video. Like always, please share the videos with your friends and subscribe the channel. Click on the bell ring so you would be notified of the future videos. Till the next video, have a good time.